3 days before Thanksgiving, I was outside the officers' barracks, the wind cutting sharp through my flannel shirt. My hand was wrapped around a small velvet box holding the engraved watch I'd spent weeks designing for my father, my way of saying thank you for teaching me how to fix things, even when he couldn't fix us. I thought my mother was calling to ask when I'd be arriving. Instead, she said, "Emma thinks it's better if you sit this one out. Lucas's family will be there, and we don't want things to look off." I asked what she meant by off. She hesitated, then answered with a lowered voice like even she didn't want to hear the words come out. "You know, flannel shirts, working-class shoes. The usual." Then came the final cut. "This place isn't for losers, Sarah." I didn't say a word. I just pressed the phone tighter to my ear and stood still. She didn't know I'd just come from briefing 3 battle groups as a rear admiral. She didn't know about the operations I'd signed off on, or the war games I'd led, or the decades I'd spent building a life out of silence and discipline. Because they never asked. I hung up, quietly. Left the box on the kitchen table, next to a mug of cold coffee. And on Thanksgiving morning, while my family clinked wine glasses over turkey and reputation, I helped my 83-year-old neighbor fix her jammed garage door. That evening, while they toasted image and legacy, Lucas stood up in their candlelit La Jolla dining room and said, "I just want to thank the woman who saved my career, the reason I'm here tonight, Rear Admiral Sarah Bennett." And every head turned when I stepped through the door in the uniform they never knew I wore. My family thought I was invisible. They thought I hadn't earned a place at their table. But they were wrong. That night, I wasn't supposed to be anyone. Not even expected. But I had been invited, last minute, by the very man who once called me when his career was in freefall and I pulled the strings to quietly save it. Lucas had made a speech. He had said my name aloud. I watched their faces as they heard it. My mother, frozen. Emma, stunned. My father, unreadable. It wasn't pride that filled the room. It was something more bitter. Embarrassment. Because the daughter they had written off was suddenly someone they had never seen coming. 2 weeks later, something shifted. The air at base felt different. Salutes came a beat late. Glances avoided. And then came the email, waiting in my inbox by the time I reached my office. Subject line, inquiry. Attached was a tabloid headline. In bold red, decorated naval officer hid identity to manipulate family image in La Jolla power circle. The article accused me of inflating my service, fabricating my rank, using my uniform as a dramatic stunt in a family rivalry. The source quoted? Emma Bennett. The quote read, "She kept everything hidden, maybe because she was ashamed of us." I didn't move. I let the screen dim. I'd countered misinformation before. Redirected media, stabilized intelligence leaks. But this? This wasn't a foreign adversary. It was my sister. And this time, the betrayal was precise. Effective. Later that day, I passed 2 young ensigns whispering outside the conference room. One looked up and asked me, hesitantly, "Ma'am, is it true?" I looked him dead in the eye and said, "No. And I don't owe anyone an explanation." But I knew then, silence wasn't armor anymore. It had become a blank page they could write their own stories on. That night, Mia sent me a video. The full interview clip Emma had done. The segment no one saw. Toward the end, her voice cracked. She said, "My sister always made me feel small. She never said it, never rubbed it in, but she never included me either. And now the whole world knows she's a rear admiral. So what am I?" I didn't sleep. I just sat in the dark watching the city lights blur outside my window. The next morning, I called her. We met at a cafe in Point Loma. The same one I took her to for her 14th birthday. She ordered black coffee and vanilla cake, just like back then. She showed up in an expensive cream coat and oversized sunglasses, like she was on a press tour. She said nothing until I did. "I saw the article," I said quietly. She took a long sip of coffee and stared past me. "Did you think I'd lie about how I felt?" "I didn't think you'd weaponize it." She leaned back, folding her arms like she was bracing for a storm. "You don't get it. You've always been above everyone. Even when you were scrubbing floors in boots, you acted like you were untouchable. You never let me in." I kept my voice steady. "I never wanted to put that weight on you." Her eyes finally met mine. "But maybe I wanted to carry it. Let me know when you're ready to give the next part." "I thought I was protecting you," I said. "You weren't," she replied, her voice sharp but not raised. "You were protecting yourself. And now everyone sees you. I'm still just the one who got compared to you at every turn." I nodded. Slowly, taking in her words. Maybe that was true. Maybe she had always lived in my shadow. But what she did, it wasn't just about her. "What you did wasn't just personal," I said quietly. "You let the world believe I lied. You painted me as someone who used her rank and her service as a tool to manipulate the people closest to her. And you did it on purpose." She didn't deny it. Her silence was confirmation enough. You didn't have to bring me down to feel valuable, I added, placing my hand gently on the table. You're my sister. I never saw you as a shadow. But today, you acted like someone I couldn't trust in the field. Her lips trembled for a moment, as if she might finally say something real. But she didn't. She looked away. I stood up, slowly, my chair pushing back with a soft scrape. I defended you my entire life, even when you didn't ask me to. But you just made me the enemy in a war I never signed up for. She stayed seated, her coffee untouched, cooling beside the plate she hadn't lifted a fork to. The very same table where, years ago, we had celebrated her 14th birthday with vanilla cake and laughter. And now, it was a battlefield of silence. That evening, I filed a formal request to limit all media contact. I suspended my personal accounts. I couldn't control the spin, not anymore. But I could control my presence. I could choose silence, not as exile, but as resistance. This time, silence would be mine. I walked through my kitchen, past the gift I had made for my father. The velvet box still sat unopened on the corner of the table. And for the first time since I placed it there, I considered throwing it away. A week passed. The story didn't fade, it multiplied. More blogs picked it up, each one a little more sensational, a little more detached from truth. They twisted it, added embellishments, created entire narratives from scraps. Forums debated whether I was authentic. A subreddit began dissecting my credentials, questioning my deployments, my promotions. One photo surfaced, me in an old sweatshirt, fixing my home's electrical panel, and someone captioned it, "Rear Admiral or handywoman for hire?" The comments came like shrapnel. Fraud. Narcissist. Liar. A woman who built a legacy out of borrowed valor. A myth in metals. Then came the email from Naval Command. A formal request for a statement. They wanted a full report of all media activity, an audit of my credentials, and a list of all public-facing commentary I'd made over the past year. It wasn't disciplinary. Not yet. But the scrutiny was unmistakable. I called Mia. She was already working. She tracked the photo's origin to an anonymous submission on a military gossip board. Metadata analysis linked the file back to a device that had been previously signed into Emma's email account. I sat at my desk, hands motionless in my lap. I didn't want to believe it. But the truth didn't require belief. It was there, in the data, cold and undeniable. Emma hadn't just spoken on camera. She had planned it. She planted it. Shaped the conversation. Nudged the dominoes. I picked up the phone and called my mother. She answered on the second ring. "Did you know?" I asked. There was a long pause. "She's just hurt," she said softly. "She never thought it would get this far." "What did you say when they called me a liar?" I asked. "I told them you were private. That you didn't like to share. I thought it would help." "No," I said firmly. "You thought it would protect the family. You thought if you made me look distant, they wouldn't look too closely at why none of you ever really saw me." She didn't argue. She didn't offer another excuse. I ended the call. The next morning, I met Lucas outside the training facility. He stood waiting by the entrance, hands deep in his pockets, shoulders heavy with guilt. "I didn't know what I was stepping into," he said. "When I mentioned you at Thanksgiving, I thought I was finally doing the right thing, giving you the credit you deserved." "She asked you to change your speech, didn't she?" I said. He looked away, then nodded. "She said if I didn't, she'd bring up a reprimand I got early on. Nothing career-ending, just embarrassing. She said it would balance the story." I closed my eyes. Not from pain. From the exhaustion of knowing too much. "She didn't think it would go this far," he added. But it had. The damage was no longer personal. It was structural. It was my name, my clearance, my future. I thanked him. I turned. I walked away. By the time I got home, the sun had long dipped beneath the skyline. I sat in the same kitchen chair I had collapsed into the night my mother called me a failure. I stared at the velvet box I had once carried like hope. I thought of all the times I stayed quiet. All the dinners I skipped. All the small sacrifices I made, believing silence was a kind of strength. But now I saw it for what it was. It had become permission. It had become the excuse they used to write me out of the story. And I was done handing them that permission. 2 days after Lucas confirmed everything, I received a message from Naval Command. I was being called to appear before a communications review panel. It still wasn't a formal investigation. But it was coming. If I didn't control the story. Now, someone else would. Mia arrived that afternoon with 2 coffees and a file folder thick with preparation. She slid her laptop across my table and said simply, "We're holding a press briefing. You're going to lead it." We spent hours drafting the speech. Every line balanced between vulnerability and resolve. We didn't write it for optics. We wrote it for the record, for truth. The morning of the briefing, I checked my phone. One text from my father. "Your mother says I should come. I'm not sure, but if you want me there, I will." It was short, simple. But it was the first time he had ever reached out without being prompted. It felt like a crack in something unmovable. When I stepped into the main hall on base, the air felt charged. Reporters were already setting up. A quiet crowd had formed: officers, cadets, members of the public. Mia stood near the back, arms crossed, eyes calm. I wore my full ceremonial uniform. The medals rested heavily across my chest. Not for show, but for memory. For truth. I approached the podium. And I began. "Let me know when you're ready for me to continue with the next section."